everyone, and welcome back to my channel and back to yet another episode of one of my Twins Guide series. So yeah, my name is Zesty, and today we're going to be going over 8 tips that will help you on your journey to becoming a Twins God. So let's get on with the list then. So for the first tip, guys, you're going to want to be placing Victor on top of down survivors. So in this way, the survivor will either have to crawl away, and they could either be going closer to the survivor or further away because they're going to want to be getting healed. So by doing this, you create basically a barrier between you and the survivor being able to get healed. So when you're walking over to go and get your slug, you can safely, you can feel safe that your slug won't be able to get up. And it is a little scummy, I will say. I do it in pretty much every single one of my Twins games, but I'd say it's something you pretty much have to use as a Twins to be able to pick up your down survivor. So for this tip, I'd say it's pretty much essential if you're going to play the Twins. Otherwise, your slugs are just going to get up because there's no protection for them when you're walking over there. So that's for tip number 1, guys. Moving on to tip number 2, and a tip that I essentially use in all of my Twins games as well, is I like to place Charlotte in areas of the map where I know survivors are going to be able to get controlled once I switch back to Charlotte. So essentially this means Charlotte has quite a big terror radius when she's coming out of her idle state. So when she does this, especially if you're on maps that have like a main building where survivors like to go, you're able to control that area, and the survivors will have to kind of guess where you are because your terror radius is so big, and it can be quite confusing for the survivors, and you may actually find that they run into you. And this is obviously very good because as Charlotte, you're supposed to be getting M1s, so you're more powerful as Victor, and this is very good on Ormond, for example. I always release Victor in the middle of the map there, and yeah, this is just a very good tip because of Charlotte's quite large terror radius. So that's for tip number 2, guys. Moving on to yet another tip, everyone. This is so essentially when you're playing as a Twins, you're not going to want to be recording Victor every time your 30-second timer is finished. I'd say this is because it actually creates more pressure by leaving that person to have Victor, and it essentially means that there could be almost no one working on gens, as it's solo queue, and as long as it's solo queue, obviously if it's a survivor friends it's a bit different, but most of the time you're going against solo queue, and this means that usually someone's not on a gen because it's solo queue, and that person's got Victor on them. That's another person. That's 2 people that aren't on gens, and then the other 2 people are they're possibly not on gens as well. And it's a good tip because it just creates pressure, like so much pressure around the map, because you've got someone that's incapacitated, and they also can't hear your terror radius. So if you wanted to go and get them, it would be a lot easier. So I'd say this is good, especially in solo queue, but as survivor friends it's not very helpful. So that's for tip number 3. Moving on to tip number 4, and we're now halfway through our list. You should not really be using Charlotte. Well, it's not very optimal to anyway. You shouldn't really be using her when the exit gates are about to be open. This is because if you manage to land a pounce on someone as Victor, they will be unable to leave through the exit gates. So when they attempt to leave through the exit gates, they'll be stuck, and the entity blockers will come up and they won't be able to leave. And then this means you can down them with Charlotte and then pick them up as usual, because even though they've been downed and they normally could get out, there's like a 5-second window where you can pick up the survivor and they won't be able to escape. So I'd say this is quite a simple tip, and people probably know about this already, but you should definitely not really be using Charlotte when the last gen has been completed. So that's tip number 4, everyone. Moving on to another tip, which I'd say a lot of people probably know this already, but once you've got essentially the whole team injured, so let's say there's just one person that's healthy left, you should not really be using Charlotte at that point. You should be letting out Victor and attempting to maybe snowball 1 to 2 people, and this is because it's much easier to chase a Victor, obviously, because he's faster and he's smaller, so they can't see him very well. And it's the sound that Victor makes, like the global sound when Victor's released, is quite scary, to be honest, especially if you're injured. Like if they have no idea where Charlotte is, if Charlotte's terror radius wasn't nearby when this happens, they'll, most of the time what I've seen is survivors will start running away from gens, and then they're in a dead zone at that point, and you can down them really easily. So I'd say let out Victor as soon as at least 3 people are injured. And even though I don't like slugging, if you want to you can slug obviously, but I prefer not to. It's very boring for me and the survivors, so I tend not to do that, and I like to play with different tactics, so it's up to you if you slug or not, but for me I'd say I don't really like doing it. So that's for tip number 5, everyone. Moving on to tip number 6, guys, you should be using Victor as a beacon to find other survivors that you can M1 as Charlotte. So when Victor is either idle or latched onto someone, you would probably have noticed by now if you played Twins at all that you'll get the killer instinct if any survivor is within his growling range, and this essentially means you have it's almost like Legion essentially. You find them and then now Victor showing where their location is, like, and especially if you're trying to loop someone, like if there's someone nearby with Victor and you're trying to loop someone without Victor on their head, you'll see the location of them all the time. So now you basically have wall hacks on someone that you're trying to loop and they have no idea. This is really good, especially for the early game when you're trying to get those early injures in. And this definitely got me a lot of downs because people, sometimes the growls are quite faint and people don't realise that Victor's nearby and they get revealed and they'll just be crouching in the corner of Urban Evasion and I'll see them and they'll probably think I'm hacking, but it's just built into their power. So I'd say you should be using their killer instinct a lot more than what you originally are. So that's for tip number 6, guys. Also, don't forget, guys, if you like my content or anything that I do in general, just remember to like and subscribe if you like the videos, obviously. The icon's in the bottom right. Thank you. So for tip number 7, guys, you're going to want to be practicing your M1 chasing skills, and this is because a lot of the time survivors will be taking your power away from you, especially in a survivor friend squad. So this will be resulting in you having no power for at least the next 30 seconds, and instead you should be using this time to find other survivors to injure. And if your basic M1 chasing skills aren't up to par, you're going to really struggle, especially at the higher ranks when you need to be getting those injuries in when you have no pressure as Victor. So I'd say you should definitely be practicing your M1 chasing skills, and you should be doing that for any killer really. And this, if you don't practice your M1 chasing skills, you're going to have a lot of gens popping very quickly because the other 3 survivors that don't have Victor on them, they're going to just be doing gens, and you should be pressuring them really when that other person has Victor on. So that's for tip number 7. Moving on to our final tip of the list, everyone. I'd say if there's a survivor that's using their tactics very well against you, like they know how to vault the pallets against Victor, they know how to use windows against Victor, etc, etc, and you're taking more than about 10 seconds to down them, I'd advise you to probably leave them and chase somewhere else. In general, as a killer, you should have a rule of thumb of about 15 seconds in a chase, and if you still haven't got the hit, then you should probably leave. And same goes with the twins and any other killer, you should be leaving the loot if there's too much barrier in the way between you and the survivor, or if you don't hit them within at least 15 seconds. So with this tip, especially with twins, because you need to be getting pressure as early on as possible, if it's taking too long, you should be leaving the loot. That's for tip number 8, guys. I just want to say thank you all so much again for watching and just supporting my channel recently. The amount of people that I've seen in the comments supporting me and just thanking me for the content that I'm doing is actually amazing. We've almost reached 30 subscribers already, and it's only just been, I think it's just been over a week. I started last Thursday, I believe, and that's insane. I've been looking at the analytics, and even though a lot of people aren't subscribed, obviously, because you don't have to subscribe if you don't want to, obviously I'm not going to force you to, yeah, I found that not a lot of people on my channel are subscribed yet, even though they're watching. So if you could, I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe if you do like my content. If not, don't worry, it's fine, honestly. But honestly, the support has been amazing recently. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.